Kahani Bar brings you a cocktail of stories in English and in Hindustani. I am Richa, and today's story is from Fauji Heart, a collection of human stories with the backdrop of Indian Army. Written for you by Neerja K, these stories will sometimes bring a smile and sometimes a tear, but they will always allow you to peek into the lives of the human beings who are often hidden behind that stiff uniform. Our story for the day is
Nessa. It was close to midnight, and the moonlight filtered through the sieve of branches of the apricot trees, and the Shayok floated noisily along the terraced fields of Bandongda. Captain J had been waiting now for almost an hour behind the watermill. The moon began to wane behind the clouds, and the small hamlet was plunged into complete darkness. Vasine's information that she would definitely come had instilled false hopes in Jay. He decided to return, giving up on the venture and chalking it up to a bad joke on Vasine's part. As he was getting ready to leave, the moon reappeared, and in its light, a silhouette of a lone female figure with a plough on her shoulders became visible. The figure stopped at the far edge of the fields, glanced all around, and after ascertaining she was alone, slipped out of her piran, which is a traditional baggy gown worn by the native Balti woman. Next, she put the yoke around her forehead and started to plough, slowly and gracefully. Jay was transfixed as he continued to watch her in sheer admiration. She had not a stitch on her. Rains had been scanty and unusually late this time, and it was a belief among the Baltis that if a virgin, usually the youngest daughter of the family, ploughed the fields naked on a full moon night, the rain gods would answer their prayers. This information had been provided to him by Vasine, the 15-year-old milk boy. Jay's first reaction had been that of sheer amusement, but curiosity had got the better of him, and so here he was. Having finished ploughing, she raised her hands heavenwards, offering prayers, and then bowed gracefully. The youngest daughter of the village elder was stunning, with pearly complexion and long flowing hair. She looked like a replica of the statue of Venus, basking in all its naked glory. How he wished he could see the maiden's face, but it wasn't clear from this distance. Momentarily, he was gripped by an animal urge, but virtue triumphed over lust, and he managed to somehow restrain himself. He was suddenly overcome with a sense of guilt as he watched her immersed in prayers. He decided to leave her in communion with God and return to his thicket in a complete stupor. The next evening, Jay decided to take a walk in the village. Bandongda was a small border village in Ladakh, the only one of the Balti tribe on the Indian side, with the rest of the community living across the border. The partition had divided the community in such a way that a large section of the female population was left behind in Bandongda. As polygamy was not practiced here, girls of considerable age were married to boys far younger than them. Baltis were industrious, friendly, and peace-loving people. They had been blessed with an environment conducive to sound health, handsome looks, and longevity. This was his second visit to the town since he had been posted here. The village was humming with activity. Women were working in the fields, and despite their dirty, baggy outfits and unkempt hair, appeared very attractive and beautiful. His eyes kept scanning for the beauty with the plough, for he seemed to have fallen in love with her at first sight. On his third outing, he came across some young girls carrying willow baskets, laughing and chatting. On seeing a Naya Saab in the village, they stopped and stared, whispering among themselves. Suddenly, his eyes fell on one young damsel, not more than 19, stunningly beautiful, with long, silky black hair made up in the customary 4 plaits. Instinct told him that she was the maiden he had been searching for, and he stood there, watching in admiration. Responding to his stares, she blushed and smiled coyly, nudging her friends to move on. At last, he had the first real glimpse of his lady love. From that day on, an evening walk through the village became a daily ritual. His heart would not rest in peace till he had seen his lady Godiva at least once in the day. Basim had confirmed to him that she was Nessa, the same girl who had been praying in the field, and the youngest daughter of the village head, the most respected man in the village. The courtship was restricted to coy glances and blushing cheeks each time Jay encountered her posse. While her interest in him was unmistakable, she did not take any further action. He shrewdly nurtured a good relationship with Yusuf, who was Nessa's younger brother, with the hope of getting closer to Nessa. But she neither sent him any message nor accepted any gifts that he sent to her. Jay enjoyed her dainty arrogance, and it made his longing for her more intense. The day he did not see her, he felt depressed and forlorn. But soon, he was posted out of this area to a picket, which was considerable distance away from Bengdangdo. He had to leave in a hurry, and this prevented him from meeting Nessa personally. Instead, he sent a letter to her through Yusuf, explaining to her the reason for this hurried departure. At his new location, he missed Nessa terribly and often wondered if she missed him as much. Despite his busy schedule and heavy workload, thoughts of Nessa haunted him all day, and he longed to return to her. Clouds of war were hovering, and preparations for the operations were on in full swing. Bangdongda was set to be the launching pad. Jay soon got orders to move to the front and was granted permission to spend one night at Bangdongda before proceeding. His happiness knew no bounds, and on reaching the village, he immediately set out on his usual walk in the village. But the village was no longer the same. All the hubbub and activities were gone, and it seemed like a ghost town. The fields were deserted, and all the inhabitants seemed to have vanished. A few fear-stricken faces peeped out of the latticed windows, but on seeing a uniformed officer, quickly downed their shutters. One window of a modest house, however, remained open, and through it, Nessa stared out at Jay. He motioned to her to come out for a brief meeting, but before she could react, a wrinkled hand drew her aside and pulled the shutters down. Dejected, he returned to the picket. He also came to know that rumors were rife, that special prayers were being held in Bangdongda under the patronage of the village head for Pakistani victory. Thus, strict surveillance had been imposed on the village head and his associates by the intelligence wing. For Jay, these rumors had no bearing. He knew these people rather well, better than others. They were simple, harmless, and God-fearing people, incapable of any malicious maneuvering. Next morning, as he was about to leave, Yusuf came running and handed him a silver ring, a sapphire crudely set in it. Nessa had sent it for him as a good luck charm. He slipped the ring onto his finger and kissed it several times. This was the first time that Nessa had reciprocated his feelings with a gift, and he left for war a happy man. The operation in their sector was a great success. The Neerja resistance offered by the Pak army was easily crushed, and the Pak-occupied Balti village across the river was liberated. This enabled the Balti tribe to reunite, and there was happiness and goodwill all around. Jay considered himself lucky to have escaped with just a flesh wound from a bullet to his right shin. They had come under heavy shelling and firing, and yet his injury paled in comparison to some of his mates. Jay was convinced that it was Nessa's lucky charm and token of love, the ring, that had protected him. After first aid, he was quickly evacuated on a mule to Bangdangdo, where a helicopter was waiting to airlift the injured. On arrival at the helipad, he was amazed to see a huge crowd, including the village head and other prominent members of the village waiting for them. The news of his injury and evacuation had somehow filtered to the village, and they had all come to bid him farewell. On seeing him, the village head moved forward, kissed his hands, and spoke in a choked voice. "Sahab, you all are the saviors of our people. Our people have been reunited because of you. Now, our girls can lead normal lives." He then continued, "Sahab, contrary to the rumors, we did not pray for the victory of Pakistan or India. Instead, we only prayed for the restoration of sanity and peace for all. Do you believe us?" "Yes, I do, sir," Jay replied, reassuringly, while patting his hand. He was immensely moved by such sincerity and goodwill. Then his eyes fell on Nessa, who was standing at a distance, away from the crowd. Despite her disheveled hair and the dark circles under her sleep-deprived eyes, she still looked hypnotic. Jay limped towards her and held her hand, which was trembling. Tears kept rolling down her beautiful eyes as she tried to give him a weak smile. He showed her the ring and tried to return it as it had fulfilled its purpose, and he had returned alive. But she put it back in his hand. Then, to his surprise, she embraced him tightly, oblivious of the crowd around them. He too clung to her with matching passion. Time just stood still for both of them as they revelled in the intensity of each other's feelings, trying hard to hold on to this short-lived union. Not a word was spoken. The reverie was broken by a hoarse command of the chopper pilot, whose patience with the lovers was wearing off. "Come on, Captain, we're getting late." Reluctantly, Nessa disengaged herself, turned, and ran towards the fields. Without a single backward glance, tears rolling down her cheeks. They both knew they could never be united. They belonged to two different worlds that could never meet. Jay limped back slowly to the helicopter, choking with emotions and firmly clutching in his hand Nessa's souvenir of pure, unadulterated love. He knew this was how things had to be. Nessa belonged here. This was her world. She was a wild daisy. She would only wilt if taken away.
This is Richa signing off. Take good care of yourselves till I'm back with the next story.